The rise of big tobacco and early warnings throughout the 20th century, the American tobacco industry evolved into one of the most powerful commercial forces in the country. Cigarette manufacturers invested heavily in marketing, embedding smoking deep into American culture. Advertisements glamorized cigarettes as symbols of sophistication, rebellion, and even health. These ads were not only ubiquitous but often directly targeted younger audiences through cartoons, giveaways, and youth-friendly slogans. Despite increasing medical research linking smoking to serious health risks such as lung cancer, heart disease, and emphysema, tobacco companies spent decades publicly denying these findings. Internally, however, they were fully aware of the dangers. By the 1960s, scientific consensus on the harmful effects of smoking was growing. Yet cigarette makers took deliberate steps to suppress this information and mislead the public. A particularly disturbing revelation came from internal documents later uncovered, which showed how companies manipulated nicotine levels to increase addiction potential. Rather than warn consumers, they focused on engineering dependency, often using carefully crafted language to evade responsibility. Their goal: capture customers early and retain them for life. Children and teenagers were a primary focus. Strategies included using characters like Joe Camel mascots designed to resonate with adolescents to make smoking seem harmless and appealing. For decades, federal regulation lagged far behind the science. The tobacco industry's ability to influence public perception and delay government action allowed them to dominate markets while knowingly endangering public health. These early tactics would later become key evidence in legal battles that exposed just how calculated and deceptive the industry had been, setting the stage for the lawsuits that followed and a reckoning years in the making. The Florida lawsuit and landmark settlement in 1995, the state of Florida launched a groundbreaking lawsuit against major tobacco companies, alleging that their products caused widespread illness and imposed a massive financial burden on the state's healthcare system. At the heart of the case was the claim that Florida taxpayers were footing the bill for treating smoking-related diseases, while tobacco companies profited by misleading the public about the dangers of their products. The lawsuit challenged the long-standing immunity tobacco firms had enjoyed, and its success reshaped the legal landscape. Florida's legal team, bolstered by internal industry documents and expert testimony, demonstrated how companies had actively concealed the harmful and addictive nature of smoking. The court filings detailed decades of false advertising and manipulation of nicotine levels designed to keep smokers dependent. In 1997, the case culminated in a historic $11.3 billion settlement. This agreement didn't just deliver financial compensation, it also imposed sweeping marketing restrictions. Tobacco companies agreed to eliminate billboard advertisements, restrict vending machine sales accessible to minors, and cease sponsorships of sporting events and transit system promotions. These measures represented a decisive blow to the industry's youth-oriented advertising tactics. Governor Lawton Chiles famously declared the lawsuit the straw that broke Joe Camel's back, referring to the cartoon mascot widely criticized for appealing to children. His statement underscored the symbolic weight of Florida's victory, which inspired similar legal actions across the country. The Florida case marked a turning point in the battle against big tobacco. For the first time, a state government had successfully held the industry accountable, not just for health damages, but for decades of deceitful practices. This legal precedent catalyzed broader public awareness, shifting both policy and perception in a fight that had long seemed unwinnable. Internal industry documents and targeting of preteens as tobacco litigation advanced, one of the most damning pieces of evidence came in the form of internal industry documents. These confidential memos, marketing plans, and research reports made public through court orders revealed a calculated and disturbing strategy, targeting children, specifically preteens, as future smokers. Among the most shocking disclosures was a quote from a tobacco executive stating, "Hook kids at 12 years of age, and they'd be hooked for life." This wasn't a careless remark, it reflected a broader business model aimed at ensuring lifelong customers by exploiting the vulnerability and impressionability of youth. Companies conducted extensive market research to better understand the psychology of children and adolescents, using the findings to tailor advertising campaigns and product designs. Flavored cigarettes, colorful packaging, and youth-friendly branding were tools deliberately chosen to appeal to kids. These efforts weren't about offering adult consumers a product. They were about initiating addiction before individuals could fully comprehend the consequences. The companies knew that if a person didn't start smoking by their early 20s, they were unlikely to ever start. The documents also revealed manipulation of nicotine delivery to maximize addictive potential. Executives were aware that nicotine dependence was central to maintaining their customer base, and they made adjustments to enhance this effect while publicly denying any such intent. These revelations turned the tide in courtrooms and public opinion. They laid bare the extent of corporate misconduct and shattered any remaining illusion that tobacco companies were merely selling a legal product. They were, instead, orchestrating addiction. The Engel v. Liggett Group class action in 1994. A group of Florida smokers filed a monumental class action lawsuit against several major tobacco companies. The case, known as Engel v. Liggett Group, became a defining legal battle in the war against big tobacco. Led by pediatrician Dr. Howard Engel as the lead plaintiff, the suit represented thousands of smokers who had suffered health consequences due to cigarette use. The plaintiffs alleged that tobacco companies had conspired to mislead the public, manipulated nicotine levels to foster addiction, and knowingly sold a dangerous product without adequate warnings. The case relied heavily on the internal documents that had come to light, proving decades of calculated deception. In 2000, a Miami jury delivered a staggering verdict: $12. $7 million in compensatory damages and an unprecedented $145 billion in punitive damages. It was the largest punitive award in U.S. history at the time and sent shockwaves through the corporate world. The jury concluded that tobacco companies had engaged in a long-term conspiracy to mislead the public and were responsible for the devastating health outcomes faced by smokers. However, the legal victory was short-lived. In 2006, the Florida Supreme Court overturned the punitive damages award and decertified the class action, citing procedural issues and the impracticality of a single trial addressing thousands of individual claims. While the massive punitive sum was nullified, the court allowed former class members to pursue individual lawsuits using the original jury's findings regarding tobacco company misconduct. This decision marked a turning point. Although the sweeping class action had collapsed, the established liability findings opened the door to a new wave of cases, each one a standalone battle, but all built on the same foundation of proven deception and accountability. The tobacco industry's legal war was far from over. The ongoing Engel progeny cases following the Florida Supreme Court's 2006 decision to decertify the Engel class action, the battle shifted from one sweeping lawsuit to thousands of individual cases. These spin-off suits, collectively known as the Engel progeny cases, allowed former class members to pursue personal claims using the original jury's findings as established facts. This meant plaintiffs did not need to reprove that cigarettes cause disease or that tobacco companies had acted negligently. They only needed to demonstrate how those facts applied to their specific injuries. The Engel progeny cases flooded Florida's court system, resulting in a new, relentless phase of litigation. By 2015, more than 8,000 individual lawsuits had been filed. Trials were held across the state, with mixed but notable outcomes. According to law professor Richard Daynard, plaintiffs were prevailing in roughly two-thirds of the cases, a striking success rate in tort litigation. Some cases resulted in multi-million-dollar verdicts, while others ended in modest awards or appeals. The tobacco industry, still flush with legal resources, fought each case aggressively, but the cumulative pressure was undeniable. These ongoing lawsuits ensured that companies remained accountable well into the 21st century. Beyond Florida, similar cases emerged in states like Massachusetts, using the Engel findings as persuasive precedent. The ripple effect was clear, even without a class action framework. Tobacco litigation continued to exact consequences through individualized justice. The Engel progeny cases stand as a testament to the persistence of plaintiffs and the legal strategy that kept corporate misconduct in the spotlight, long after the original trial ended. Systemic impact on public health and policy. The long battle against Big Tobacco reshaped more than just courtrooms. It transformed public health policy and corporate accountability in America. What decades of fragmented regulation had failed to achieve, the courtroom accomplished through relentless litigation, damning disclosures, and landmark settlements. Trial lawyer Steve Yeard, instrumental in Florida's case, emphasized this shift. He stated plainly that regulation alone had not curbed the tobacco industry's abuses. It was litigation that finally broke through the wall of corporate influence. By exposing internal documents, securing enormous settlements, and placing executives under oath, trial lawyers forced the public and lawmakers to confront a truth that had long been obscured, that cigarette makers knew the dangers and lied about them. As a result, tobacco advertising saw dramatic restrictions. Youth-targeted campaigns were dismantled, billboards were taken down, vending machines were removed from public places, and sports sponsorships once bearing cigarette brands disappeared. The cultural image of smoking, once glamorous and rebellious, began to tarnish. These legal efforts also spurred education campaigns funded through settlement money, including the National Truth Campaign, which rebranded smoking as manipulation rather than choice. Smoking rates began to decline, particularly among teenagers, reversing decades of upward trends. Perhaps most significantly, the tobacco trials validated the power of the civil tort system. When regulators failed, private citizens, lawyers, and state governments stepped into the void. The litigation not only compensated victims, but also imposed behavioral change on an industry long seen as untouchable. The legacy of these cases is visible today in fewer smokers, clearer warning labels, and tighter advertising laws, a public health transformation catalyzed not by policymakers, but by the courts. Conclusion: accountability through the courts. The tobacco litigation saga remains one of the most powerful examples of how the American legal system can challenge corporate power and force accountability. What began as a state-level confrontation evolved into a nationwide reckoning that changed the tobacco industry and public health forever. Central to this transformation was the role of trial lawyers who pursued justice when regulatory agencies failed. As attorney Steve Yeard emphasized, it wasn't government oversight that broke the industry's grip, it was the courtroom. Through strategic litigation, these lawyers exposed a pattern of deception, compelled disclosure of incriminating internal documents, and secured financial penalties that made further misconduct untenable. The Engel progeny cases, still active decades later, serve as a lasting legacy of this movement. Each individual lawsuit represents not only a personal fight for justice, but also a continuation of a larger mission to hold tobacco companies responsible for knowingly endangering millions. Even without a class action structure, the use of established liability findings has kept pressure on the industry and maintained public awareness of its past conduct. Beyond monetary settlements, the lawsuits delivered cultural and legal change. They redefined corporate responsibility, influenced marketing regulations, and helped reduce smoking rates, particularly among young people. Millions of lives may have been extended or saved as a result. This story is more than a legal victory. It's a testament to persistence, evidence-based advocacy, and the capacity of civil litigation to drive systemic reform. In the end, the courtroom became the battleground where truth prevailed over profit.